voiceamerica.com.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101 with host Susan Bartelstone. We're so happy you've joined us this weekend. Over the next hour, you'll learn the tips, tricks, and vital information that'll help you keep yourself confident and safe. Now, here's the host of Crime Prevention 101, Susan Bartelstone.
And hello, everybody, and welcome, yes, once again, it's Crime Prevention 101, and yes, indeed, this is Susan Bartelstone here with you today, and this is the second in a series of shows that I'm doing on non-traditional methods of healing, and I'm talking about healing from sexual assault, crime, violence, emotional or physical abuse, or any other form of trauma. And I identified 3 areas so far that I'm focusing on healing through. And the first is innovative therapy modalities. The second is self-defense or martial arts courses. And the third is creativity and the arts that will nourish your soul. And my theory is that you need to do at least 2, if not 3 of these to really heal completely as you can. Last week, my show focused on a groundbreaking form of therapy called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, and that was just a spectacular show. If you didn't catch it, I truly urge you to. Today's show, I'm going to be talking about another innovative form of therapy called self-defense, and yeah, you heard right. Self-defense courses and martial arts courses are definitely therapeutic for those who want a more aggressive form of healing. And my special guest today is Joanne Factor, who is a longtime self-defense instructor from Seattle, Washington, and she's been running very special survivor-only classes as well as her regular self-defense classes for years. But before I introduce Joanne, I have a few things that I want to share with you. Now, I got a webmail in the mail someone sent me, and this is through my DearSafetySolutions.com website. And if any of you listen to some of the past shows, I did a whole show on these webmails, and I love it that you're sending me these things. And my guest from BreakTheChain.org kind of doesn't like me to publicize these webmails, but I think if the information is good, I want to get it out there. And this webmail is called 5 Things You Never Knew Your Cell Phone Could Do, and one of them I thought was particularly good. And it was how to disable a stolen cell phone. And if you check your mobile phone serial number, all you have to do to check this, you have to key in the following digits on the phone: the asterisk key, the number key, a 0, 6, and the number key. So that's asterisk, number key, 0, 6, number key. When you do that, a 15-digit code appears on your screen, and this is a unique number to your handset there. Write that number down, keep it somewhere. If your phone gets stolen, all you have to do is phone your service provider, give them the code, and they're going to be able to block your handset so that even if a thief changes the SIM card in the phone, your phone will be totally useless. Well, you're probably not going to get that phone back, but at least you know that whoever stole it can't use it or resell it. And in the email it said if everyone does this, there would be no point in stealing mobile phones. Well, I love that idea. Second, I've got a couple of books. We're talking about healing, and there are a couple of books that I like that I thought were also very helpful in the healing process. The first one is called Among Warriors, a martial artist in Tibet, and it was written by Pamela Logan. And this is a kind of old book. It came out in 96, but it's one of my favorites, and I read through it quite a bit. And this is the true story of a martial artist's solo quest to find the mystical Kampa tribe of warrior bandits. And the Kampa warrior bandits reside in a remote region of Tibet. And she was trying to find them because she felt that they embodied all she hoped to achieve through her martial arts training. It's quite a book, and how she actually traveled through Tibet looking for this mystical warrior tribe and what happens when she found them. And it's a great adventure story, it's a great martial arts story, and it's a great woman story. So for all you adventurers out there and you martial artists out there and those that want to look at a great woman story, this is a terrific book, Among Warriors, a Martial Artist in Tibet. And I'm also recommending a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and it was written by Viktor Frankl, and it's Viktor. Frankl is Frankl. And Viktor Frankl is a world-famous psychiatrist, and he survived 3 years, horrifying years, in a Nazi concentration camp. And this is the story of how he held on to his hope despite the incredible suffering that he went through, and how he formed his psychology of survival based on the one thing that the Nazis could not take away from him, and that he calls the will to meaning. And he defines that as the way one accepts one's fate in a seemingly hopeless situation. And he said that that way that you do it can show you the deeper meaning of life. Now, this is a scary book, but it's a very wise, and it's a very challenging, and it is a psychological path to healing. And for those who are trying to figure out why things happen in their life and what the deeper meaning of these things are. So I thought that was a terrific book, and I heartily recommend it. And I'm also going to do another segment of what I call There Ought to Be a Law, where I get to rant about stupid things people say and do regarding self-defense and crime prevention, or anything else that I don't particularly like. So my rant this week involves a newspaper article titled 5 Buried Alive, Pakistani Tradition. And this appeared in the New York Daily News on August 31st. And it's something that took place in a remote village in Pakistan, and I'm going to read this to you. A Pakistani lawmaker defended a decision by Northwestern tribesmen to bury 5 women alive because they wanted to choose their own husbands. And this lawmaker was telling these stunned members of Parliament to spare him their outrage. And I quote, "These are centuries-old traditions, and I will continue to defend them." Ishwar Ullah Zari is the representative who was speaking. And 3 of these women were teenagers. They were first shot, and they were thrown into a ditch. And then they were, while they were still breathing, it was reported that they were buried. The mud was shoveled over them. And their only crime was that they wished to marry men of their own choosing. And this parliamentary leader, the parliament was stunned. Lawmakers walked out, called it barbaric. I don't know what to say about this. This just infuriates me. It makes me want to go postal, you know. Well, let's get Eve Ensler and Victory Over Violence organization over there. Let's shine a big spotlight, a bright spotlight on these murders. This is just plain criminal, and you know what? There ought to be a law. Well, okay, I'm calming myself down now before my guest feels she's got to defend herself from me. So without further ado, let me introduce Joanne Factor, a self-defense instructor extraordinaire, and I want to talk about how we heal from trauma and crime using self-defense and martial arts. Now, Joanne began her study of self-defense and martial arts 16 years ago. She's been teaching almost that long and significantly does many trauma survivor-only classes. Over the past 10 years, she's taught physical and mental strategies to military veterans, sorority sisters, grandmothers, and just about every category of woman from age 5 to 75. That's pretty awesome, right? She is the founder of Strategic Living, and that's her organization, and her programs deal with risk assessment, awareness strategies, physical skills, and so forth. She's also the head of the Self-Defense Certification Division of the National Women's Martial Arts Federation, and I am so proud to say that I am a certified self-defense instructor by the NWMAF. And on her website, she says, I believe self-defense is not the one time in your life you might have a scary encounter. I believe self-defense should be an integral part of your strategic life, and I want to be a factor, get it, factor, in helping you live strategically so you achieve your own goals for safety, self-defense, and personal power. Love it. And last but not least, Joanne was voted Best Feminist Butt-kicker of 2007 by the Seattle Weekly newspaper. Joanne, you there? Welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Thank you, Susan. I am so delighted to be here.
I love that, Best Feminist Butt-kicker. Wow, that's a cool honor.
It is.
Now, Joanne, I've talked about my own incident on a few of my past shows. Many years ago, I was attacked by a guy that I was dating when I tried to break up with him, and that's what kind of led me to study martial arts and then self-defense. And I went on to have 17 years of training. Now, we're coming up to a break, so when we come back, I'm going to ask you to tell us what made you take up karate and then self-defense. So hold tight. We're going to be right back.
Okay.
News, opinion, your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime, How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart, which stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today. Have you ever thought about having your own internet talk show? Well, if you said yes, then click About Us. Then click Be a Host to get more information. Or just call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417.
Say that again?
480-294-6417. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
And welcome back, everybody. And right before the break, I was talking about what led me into taking martial arts and then self-defense. And now, Joanne, we're talking with Joanne Factor, self-defense instructor from Seattle. What made you get into the karate game?
Well, years and years and years ago, almost in a different life, I was a graduate student in New York. I was studying anthropology. And,
really?
Yeah. I was in a PhD program. And then I decided to do field work. You know, it's required for the program. And I went way across the country to a totally different area. And I was in like a totally different social environment. And doing field work actually convinced me that this is not the field for me. Now, this was not going to be my future career. So, but I found myself in situations that I have to say I was really partly lucky, but partly I surrounded myself with people who cared about me and looked out for me.
Okay.
So I didn't wind up in any bad situations, but they were definitely high risk. And then I moved to Seattle. I was fairly new to Seattle. I was looking for, some activities, and I found the Feminist Karate Union. And the Feminist Karate Union was started like 37 years ago by a woman named Pi Bateman. And
I know that name well.
Yeah, she is one of those women who way back 40 years ago recognized the need for women's self-defense. There was no such thing as women's self-defense back then.
Mm-hmm.
And she's one of those people who who started those first women's self-defense classes. And part of it turned into a karate school, part of it turned into self-defense. So I wound up taking karate in a school that had a really good, solid foundation in real women's real self-defense.
Okay.
And I decided that, this was something I wanted to do. So I started.
Now, was this martial arts and self-defense, or was it?
Yes.
Actually, what form of martial arts was this?
The form of martial arts is Shito-ryu karate. So it's a traditional form of karate.
Japanese?
Japanese.
Okay.
It's a traditional Japanese form of karate, but we also do exercise. We recognize that martial arts and self-defense it depends on the school, can be a little different, can be very different. And martial art is definitely an art. People come to martial arts for a lot of reasons. Some of them come for self-defense. Some women come for fitness. Some come for, the more meditative aspect of the mind-body connection.
And that's a very good distinction. There's a big difference between self-defense, especially as it's kind of evolved in the recent past, and martial arts. And I'm gonna hold that because I got a few questions to talk to you about that.
Uh-huh.
But it's good for people to know that it's not the same thing.
Right.
And there are some significant differences in it.
Right. So when we train our student for sparring, sparring is a sport. And you're going to specific targets, and the aim is not to knock somebody out. But in self-defense, the targets that are illegal in sparring are your best self-defense targets. So that's a major difference.
Absolutely correct.
And we, in our school, when we say, okay, now we're going to do self-defense, that's a totally different process. That's a totally different set of teaching, set of material.
What made you start teaching? How long had you been training before you started teaching?
Well, in our martial arts program, as you progress in ranks, you get a little more responsibility because teaching the material that we've learned is another way of learning it again and learning it in more depth. So you begin teaching little segments here and there to small groups, and I was teaching my own classes after about 3 years, and I decided I wanted to teach self-defense classes also for women who didn't want to sign up for a martial arts program. They just wanted maybe a 4-week self-defense class.
And that's one of the main differences because martial arts is kind of ongoing training. You want at least three times a week till whenever. But whereas a self-defense course is a short, specific, concentrated, maybe 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks of training.
Yes, absolutely. But, at that time, what I thought was we were thinking of ways to build up the karate school. And I thought, if you teach self-defense to the community, not only are you doing a service, but it's also good for the school. And it also allows, I've used my assistants have come from that school, so it gives them that extra experience in teaching self-defense to the community.
Now, tell me about Strategic Living. This is the organization. When did you start it, and what are your goals with Strategic Living?
I started that in October 2003 when it was after I was hired by we'll talk about this class a little later, the Veterans Administration Medical Center.
Yes, definitely going to talk about that.
Yes. I was hired to do the program Taking Charge, the physical skills part of it, and this was the first time that I had worked exclusively with a population of women who were that damaged by sexual assault. And by the end of that class, I felt that this program and my contributions had made an incredible difference in their lives. These are women who going grocery shopping was a terrifying experience. Sometimes checking the mail would really create an anxiety attack.
These are all the symptoms of this post-traumatic stress disorder that's so debilitating. Just a simple thing like going out of the house to get the mail can be a terrifying experience.
Yes, all these women were suffering long-term debilitating post-traumatic stress disorder. And part of the idea of this program was to move them out of that constant cycle of being controlled by their trauma. And the idea of the self-defense class was to have them recognize that in the future they're not going to change the past, but they do have options for the future, and they can break out of that spin cycle and just move on. So a lot of them relive the trauma over and over again in their heads.
So strategic living actually specializes in many different types of training, including these survivor classes. We're gonna come back to that class again because I've got more questions for you. But I know you specialize in teaching women. Do you also teach men in your in some of the regular classes?
Yes. A lot of my classes, the ones I offer through other organizations, legally have to be open to anybody of the appropriate age.
Plus, we also want to recognize that men are crime and trauma victims as well.
Absolutely.
And they're going to find self-defense just as healing and as empowering as a woman crime survivor. Absolutely.
Most of the men who take the classes that I teach, sometimes they're there to support their wives or girlfriends, but sometimes they're there because they're about to do something like travel to, teach English in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to learn a little bit about self-defense because maybe they didn't grow up really knowing anything about self-defense.
I think that is a terrific idea.
It is.
Head it off at the pass before the you have to come in for another reason.
Right. And
I think that's great.
That's another big reason why people come to my classes is they want to do something that's new and exciting and totally unknown. And they want that strategic preparedness.
I love that, strategic living. And by the way, her website is www.strategicliving.org, and I really like that website. She's got a very informative newsletter that you can subscribe to, so you don't have to be just a Seattle resident. And in fact, in one of the issues, you wrote about assault among the homeless and workshops that you did for that population. I mean, that's a very underserved population in many, many ways. And in the article, I think you wrote that you found that, was it 90% or all of them had been assault survivors of some kind or trauma survivors?
Yes, I did a class for women in transitional housing. So they were coming out of being homeless, and they were in different life skills classes. This was a whole facility where they lived and they sought employment, and they took different classes just on life skills that a lot of us take for granted, like keeping a calendar, showing up to work on time, getting along with other people, just basic. But part of it was self-defense. And 90% of the women in those classes came out of abusive relationships. Some of them had even went into become homeless just to escape their abuser.
I think that's pretty common, especially among the people who have been in a domestic violence situation. That is extremely common, to have no place to go if you've got to escape. And they wind up in those facilities. And I'm really hoping, one of the reasons, because Joanne's courses touch so many populations that really could benefit from the healing aspects and the empowering aspects of self-defense training. So it's kind of a model program for me. It's one of the reasons I wanted to focus on her program today. Now, I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, since I know what I think the answer is to this question, since I taught self-defense for a long time. But is self-defense or martial arts appropriate for every survivor?
Yes and no. It depends where you are at in your stage. If I get a call from a woman who's currently in an abusive relationship and wants to take a self-defense class, I say that's great, maybe not right now. What you should be doing is, A, get a good lawyer, get a good DV advocate who knows the legal ropes, and get a good therapist. You'll need all those people on your team. What's happening now, and this is, for those group of women who are currently in abusive relationships or at that stage in the relationship where they're leaving and going back and leaving and going back.
Right.
And this is something that's been on the rise, certainly in Seattle. I'm not sure where it's at in the rest of the country, is that there's a law in Seattle that if the police are called to domestic violence and there's obvious evidence of physical violence, the police have to arrest somebody.
It's like that in New York, too.
But what abusers are doing here is they're using that as part of the abuse. They're goading the victim into actually hitting them. So when the police come, they're the ones with the bloody nose. The abuser is the one with the bloody nose, and it's the victim that's carted off to jail.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, that is something that at least out here we're seeing more and more of. And
I don't know if that's the case in New York. I think I'm going to have to delve into it a little bit. One of my criteria was the same. If someone came to me and said they were in an abusive relationship and they wanted to learn self-defense so that they would know how to defend themselves against the abuse, I had to say no. I said, this is like, taking a lighted match and throwing it onto a pool of gasoline. You're going to have a fire, an explosion. Come to me when you're out of that situation and you need to pick up the pieces and you've been out of it for at least 6 months. This is not the time, this is not the appropriate method for dealing with the situation, is learning how to defend yourself within it. That's not the right approach. And I also, if somebody had been a victim very recently, I found that it wasn't a good idea to start a self-defense course.
Right.
Me personally, I kind of had a 6-month rule. I want it to be at least 6 months in the past, and I wanted that person to be in therapy at the time. Because putting yourself into a self-defense course, and of course, I try and teach as realistically as I possibly can with even a simulation of the scenario if the person is psychologically ready, because that's the most powerful in terms of healing. If it's too soon, and if you're not in therapy, it can bring up just a disastrous symptoms and setbacks, and it's also not good for the other people in the class. So those are kind of my 2 criteria. And if it was really recent, it's most effective when you're actually in the therapy situation while you're taking the course, because it's going to be rough. There's no way around that.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about, you did some classes for the Providence Everett Medical Center. These are kind of recurring classes, and also the VA Medical Center. And here you've got the perfect situation, because the people are in therapeutic situation, they are receiving counseling, and now you can deal with the difficult emotions the way that a self-defense course will do, and that person has access to getting the help. And we're coming up on another break, Joanne, so let's hold this thought. We'll come back and we'll start talking a little more about these classes. All right, so everybody stay tuned. Good stuff coming.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our All-Star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime, How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart would stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today. Talk, talk, talk. That's all we do is talk. Yeah! If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. That's it. That's it. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
And welcome back to Crime Prevention 101. I'm talking with self-defense instructor from Seattle, Joanne Factor. And we're talking about teaching classes for survivors and the powerfulness of self-defense in terms of healing. And tell me a little bit about both the Providence, Everett Medical Center classes and the VA classes. We talked a little bit about that.
Okay, the Providence Everett Medical Center class, it's an annual weekend workshop I do, and it is for Providence Everett Medical Center runs a sexual assault program, so they provide advocates and group therapy and individual therapy for sexual assault survivors. And it's one of the major centers in this region, in the Puget Sound area. And so they run this class weekend workshop, and I've been teaching the physical skills. It's physical skills, but also a lot of the emotional skills, emotional intelligence, in a way that you really need to recognize when somebody is, does not have your best interest at heart. And the process that potential assailants are using to try to pick victims, target victims, groom victims, so that they don't really suspect that this very nice person who is really friendly to them really means to attack them.
And that's an important concept, the grooming of the victim. And that people don't realize, but it is a process that they use to set this up so that they can accomplish what they want.
Yes. And what is really, really horrifying is how many of the women in that program are teenagers. Okay, so many of them are teenagers, but I think a lot of people intellectually know that most women are assaulted by people they know.
I think the figure is actually 75%.
Yeah, it depends on what part of the world, what part of the country you're in, but yes, everywhere it varies around there. So most women are assaulted by people they know. And that can be a date, that could be the delivery boy, that could be the friend of your brother, the uncle. The grandfather. It's not always a date, and it's by no means the majority is the stranger jumping out from behind the bush. That is the actual minority of assaults and sexual crimes especially. Right. And what I tell women in my classes for the general public, most of whom have never experienced sexual assault, I do this little pop quiz with them, and most of the time, most of them get the answer right, that most women are assaulted by people they know. But they came into class because they were more concerned with stranger danger. Mm-hmm. So I asked them to think about, why is there that disconnect there? Why do you know that you're more likely assailant to somebody you know, but you're more concerned with stranger danger? And when I do the classes at Providence, Everett, and at the VA, it is so, I think it's more than 75% who've been assaulted by people they know. And the relationships are pretty amazing. It's neighbors, it's grandfathers. The last class I taught at Providence, Everett, I think about a quarter of the young girls, their assailant was a grandfather.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, and the difficulty in recovering from trauma when you've got that kind of betrayal of trust, someone that you especially had a relationship with that was a friendly one or a familiar one, it's devastating.
It is, especially if this is somebody that you're supposed to love, who's supposed to be, like, raising you, supposed to be helping you learn. I mean, this is really important. If you were sexually assaulted when you were younger, you have a higher risk of re-victimization throughout your life. Important point. Yes. Absolutely. I think nobody knows for sure what's happening, why. Part of it is you're not really, as you're growing up, you're not learning appropriate boundary setting skills because somebody you trusted has totally violated those boundaries. And this, by the way, is an extremely, one of the things that self-defense classes and martial arts are really good at helping you do. Mm-hmm. Training is geared towards this boundary setting and so forth. Yeah. Boundary setting is probably one of the most important skills in self-defense. You can probably just do a whole self-defense program as boundary setting. Mm-hmm. And I know this is an important component for what you teach. Yes. And now Providence, Everett was once a year, weekend, and the VA Medical Center, how often do you do that? That, again, is a once a year, but that's a long class. That's like 3 months. It's a 3-month class, and you're dealing with this? Yes, the group of women here, they are all women veterans. So these are women who have served our country, and they have been sexually assaulted. And this is an underreported crime for many reasons. I actually had an occasion on another one of my shows that I did. I interviewed the executive director, Stephen Gladay, from an organization called Men Can Stop Rape that I can't talk enough about. And they actually, what they're trying to do, Joanne, is change people's attitude, men's attitudes, young boys, and their relationship with women and what is a positive relationship. And they just got a contract to work with all 5 branches of the military in terms of this attitude change. That is incredible. It is, and that would be so excellent. I'm going to have to put you guys in touch with each other. He's an amazing person, and this whole issue of sexual assault in the military is very hush-hushed. Mm-hmm. It is. It is incredibly hush-hush. I heard your interview. I thought it was fantastic. I was, like, really hanging on to, like, everything he said. Yeah, he was an amazing, and I'm going to help him out in any way that I can to promote Men Can Stop Rape, because I just think it's so important what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But you are seeing the result of what he's trying to stop. Right. Right. About how many people go through that VA medical center? Do you have any idea? Oh, my God, a lot. I mean, Seattle is home to several major military bases. Not Seattle per se, but the immediate area. So we have Madigan, we have Fort Lewis, we have bases in Bremerton. There's a lot of military bases in this area. And the VA hospital, it's a big hospital. It serves a large population.
And what have you found as the result of teaching the self-defense to this population, and also at Providence, Everett?
Mm-hmm. The idea in this weekend workshop is a lot of these women, these are, again, the women for whom going to the grocery store is terrifying. And what we want them to do is be able to actually get back some normal semblance of life. So we want them to be able to go out and do things, like if they want to go back to school. A lot of these women, when you watch people, and this is about boundary setting, you watch people and how they sit and stand and, near each other, people they don't know. These women, if they don't know each other, they require a lot more personal space. Their personal space bubble is quite a bit larger than ours. So right away, you need a room that's somewhat larger for a relatively, what you would think of as a smaller number of people. But you want them to be able to just interact with other people, to be able to make friends, to be able to keep friends, to be able to have relationships, to be able to go out without constant fear. What happens to the body is if you are in a constant, some of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder are hyperarousal and hypervigilance. So you're always on red alert.
That something's going to happen.
Right. But if you're always on red alert, that's very, very draining on your body. And a lot of these women exhibit other medical problems. Fibromyalgia is a big one. A lot of women have that. A lot of women also have other disabilities. And I think the Center for Disease Control surveyed just any women who've been through sexual assault, and you're at a higher risk for substance abuse, for attempted suicide, for other illnesses.
Now, these are all PTSD symptoms. Absolutely. We're just talking about that in my last radio show. And this is self-defense classes in conjunction with healing. Within a therapeutic setting is such a powerful healing modality. And this is one of the reasons, Joanne, that I wanted to have you on the show, because if anyone out there is part of a VA center or part of a hospital like Providence, Everett, you contact Joanne about how to structure these classes. Maybe she'll come down and do them for you. We're going to talk more about that. We're coming up to our break. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between self-defense and martial arts in terms of healing. So stay tuned, everybody. You're not going to want to miss this.
Have you ever thought about having your own internet talk show? Well, if you said yes, then click About Us. Then click Be a Host to get more information. Or just call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417.
Say that again?
480-294-6417. VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartelstone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.fightsafe.com for more information. You'll also find information there on Susan's upcoming Crime Prevention 101 personal safety teleseminars. Think fast, talk fast, fight smart, which stress the many opportunities you have to deter or defuse a criminal encounter and how to use your brains instead of your muscles in a fight. Look for the new book information or sign up for Susan Bartelstone's personal safety seminars at www.fightsafe.com today. News, opinion, passion. Your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartelstone.
And welcome back, everybody. We're talking about self-defense as part of the healing process. And we were talking about, with Joanne Factor, self-defense instructor in Seattle, about the courses that she does with the VA. And, Joanne, you had a final comment on that. If people want to talk to someone about getting these classes in a VA facility?
Right. If anyone listening is part of the VA the Veterans Administration healthcare system, the person to contact about this program, the program is called Taking Charge, and the team leader is Dr. Wendy David, and she is a totally amazing woman. For one thing, she's a psychologist. For another thing, she's blind. And she's pioneered self-defense not only for women veterans, but also for blind people. So she's done a program,
awesome.
Safe with Sight, that is really amazing.
And by the way, let me just say, I trained with a blind martial artist some years ago, and I mean, there was no target that he couldn't find.
Wow.
So how do people get in touch with her?
She's at the VA Medical Center in Seattle. So if you're in the VA system, it's probably really easy to go through the system and find her.
Okay, and if they can't, you can find her through Joanne Factor, strategicliving.com.
.org,
strategicliving.org. And Joanne will be happy to help you get in touch with her and maybe give you some idea of how to structure these classes.
Absolutely. We're working on a treatment manual for the program. So
great.
Will
you send me that when you get it done? I would love to take a look at it.
Well, it belongs to the VA technically.
Well, maybe ask them if they don't mind.
Yeah.
I'll give them all the publicity I can. How's that?
Okay.
In return. Okay, Joanne, thank you. Now let's talk a little bit about the difference between self-defense and martial arts. Now, you are the head of the Self-Defense Certification Division of the National Women's Martial Arts Foundation, and that is a terrific organization. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but I just wanted to I got emails. I've been dubbed the Ann Landers of self-defense because of my Dear Safety Solutions website. And people send me emails and they ask for advice on issues that concern them. And I got an email from a young woman who said that she was a crime survivor and she had taken 2 self-defense classes, but she was still subject to fears, and she was in therapy at the time, and she said, what would I suggest? And I suggested that she look into a martial arts program instead of, because she's already had the self-defense training, and she wrote me back that she just considered martial arts more of a sport, people breaking boards and so forth. And, what I told her was that martial arts, once you've got some self-defense under your belt, martial arts can further that healing process if you're still needing to further it, because it's very possible that she had deep anger or rage that was buried. And martial arts is a really good way of therapeutic way, punching and kicking things, and of dealing with that rage and getting it out in a safe, almost therapeutic environment. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. It depends on the school, and I would really recommend that she, maybe if she's thinking seriously of martial arts, make a list of schools in the area and go actually watch classes. And there are some teachers who are really just interested in sports and training champions and stuff like that. I know quite a few of them. And then there are other schools that really do recognize that that martial arts is part of a healing process. And, I mean, some of the schools that are leaders in that, some of the bigger schools, hand-to-hand in the Oakland area in California, Thousand Waves in Chicago.
I love them. Nancy Lanou, one of the ways I got involved in this, she was my teacher.
Wow.
Love Nancy. Thousand Waves in Chicago.
They're excellent. Brooklyn Women's Martial Arts in New York.
Love them too. Brenda Jones, know her.
Mm-hmm. Of course, my school, Feminist Karate Union in Seattle. Also 7-Star Women's Kung Fu in Seattle.
Now, the National Women's Martial Arts Federation, NWMAF.org, has a website that you can go to for referrals to really good survivor-oriented martial arts programs. So I like to just make sure that I bring that out. NWMAF.org, strategicliving.org is Joanne's program. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today. It was an important show, and I really hope that people get the message that this is the second arm in the healing process. Go to Joanne's website, everybody. Sign up for her newsletter. If you're in Seattle, check out her classes. If you're in a facility that treats survivors and you want to learn how to bring self-defense in there for those whom it will be appropriate, get in touch with her as well. I always say no absolutes exist in a crime scenario, and no advice can address every variable, right, Joanne? We know that. Every situation has to be evaluated individually, and you can only respond, and you should only respond in the way that you instinctively judge is the best. But training is what helps you make those assessments instinctively and correctly and quickly. And it's my aim with this radio show and with all the teaching that I do to give people the information and the options that you can internalize to help you make that assessment. Joanne, just such a pleasure to have you today with me.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great, and I am so glad that you are providing this service to the community.
We try. Now, if any of you have missed past shows, you can hear all my past episodes of Crime Prevention 101. Just go to my host page on the voiceamerica.com website because they're all archived there. Or you can go directly to crimeprevention101.com, and that will take you directly there to that host page. Also, I've got show notes for all my past shows posted on my dearsafetysolutions.com website. And I'm going to have my link to Joanne's website, strategicliving.org, is going to be posted there under the show notes. And I'm going to have the National Women's Martial Arts Federation link there. And there's also a really nice self-defense organization. It's called the Association of Women's Self-Defense Advancements. I'm going to put a link to them on that show notes page. And don't forget, while you're at dearsafetysolutions.com, I've got a safety tips page for you that has lots of good stuff, and I've got a tip sheet coming on the difference between martial arts and self-defense. So if you've got any more questions about that, I think you'll find the answers in that tip sheet. As always, if you've got a question or a comment about today's show or a safety concern that you would like help with or a webmail that you'd like me to comment on, please just go to my dearsafetysolutions.com website and post it in the response box on the left side. You can also just email me at solutions@fightsafe.com and just say I'd like help with the problem to minimize it getting lost in my spam filter. I want to say again, for those of you that might have been a survivor of any of the kinds of crimes we talked about, nothing was your fault. Really look into self-defense as a way to really, really believe that. Next week, oh my God, we've got a lot of great shows coming up in future weeks. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I'm going to be doing several programs on domestic violence from different angles. I've got one about domestic violence in the Orthodox Jewish community that you don't hear a lot about. I'm contacting some people There's an organization for beauty salon operators who are being trained to spot domestic violence, because who sees your bruises better than the person that's doing your hair or your nails? And what these salon operators are trying to do about domestic violence, I'm going to be talking about more non-traditional methods of healing. There's a great organization of people healing through creativity.org, and we'll talk about using the arts and creativity to nourish your soul and help you put into perspective what happened. October is also Crime Prevention Awareness Month, and I have got a great guest, Todd Davis from LifeLock, who's going to come and talk about how to prevent identity theft, and I'm so excited about this show. So, you know what I mean? You know what I say every week, right? It'd be a crime not to listen, so stay tuned and stay safe.
We hope you got some useful information and inspiration this week on Crime Prevention 101. Susan Bartelstone invites you to join us again next Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on Voice America. Have a great weekend and a safe weekend.